Before the iconic beard, before the Gettysburg Address, before he became the face etched into Mount Rushmore, Abraham Lincoln was just a man with a vision and a clean-shaven face. This rare portrait captures Lincoln in his early political years, unadorned, vulnerable, and deeply human. Without the beard that would later become his symbol of wisdom and leadership, this image reveals a lean, solemn figure carrying the weight of a nation on the edge of civil war. It's hard to imagine now, but this was the face voters first saw. The raw version of a man who would go on to preserve the Union and redefine freedom in America. This isn't just a portrait, it's the calm before the storm. It all started with just 4 words: delicious, refreshing, exhilarating, invigorating. This forgotten newspaper clipping from the 1890s isn't just an ad, it's the birth certificate of an empire. Coca-Cola wasn't always a global icon. Once, it was a simple syrup created by a war veteran addicted to morphine, trying to find a cure for his pain. Dr. John Pemberton had no idea he was brewing the most consumed soft drink in human history. There were no flashy slogans, no billion-dollar budgets. Just bold black letters printed in a local Atlanta paper. This photo freezes that first moment before the explosion, before World War marketing, before Santa Claus wore red because of Coke. It's haunting to think. This tiny ad sparked a cultural revolution, reaching every continent, every fridge, every generation. A reminder that sometimes the smallest print can leave the biggest mark on history. Would you have noticed it or walked right past? Look closely at this smile. Behind those bright eyes is a child who had no idea her name would echo through history. Not as a celebrity, not as a hero in battle, but as a voice trapped in silence. This is Anne Frank in 1940, just 11 years old, sitting for a simple photo, taken in a moment of peace before her world collapsed. She loved books. She laughed loud. She dreamed big. And yet, in just a few years, she would be hiding in an attic, writing words that would survive when she did not. It's chilling. How normal this looks. How ordinary. That's the tragedy. Genocide doesn't start with horror. It starts with quiet. With faces like this, smiling. Forgotten by the world until it's too late. This photo isn't just history. It's a warning. Because behind every face like Anne's, there's a story that deserves to be told before it's lost. While hundreds around him raised their arms in blind obedience, one man stood still. In this powerful 1936 photo, taken at a Nazi rally in Hamburg, Germany, a single individual, circled in defiance, refuses to salute. His name was August Landmesser, a man who dared to love beyond borders. He had fallen in love with a Jewish woman, Irma. Their relationship, forbidden by the regime, cost him everything: his job, his freedom, and eventually his life. But in that single moment, frozen in time, August chose courage over conformity. He didn't scream, he didn't fight, he simply didn't raise his hand. And that silence? It echoed louder than any speech. This photograph isn't just about resistance. It's about the quiet, powerful strength of doing what's right, even when you're completely alone. Would you have done the same? Or would you have followed the crowd? At first glance, it looks broken, unfinished steel piercing the Parisian sky like shattered bones. But this haunting 1888 photo captures the birth of a miracle. The Eiffel Tower, once mocked as a monstrosity, rose from the ground with no blueprint for success. Just 18,000 iron parts, 2.5 million rivets, and one man's vision. Gustave Eiffel was ridiculed by critics who called it useless and disgraceful. But he didn't build for praise. He built for legacy. Through storms, doubt, and political backlash, the tower kept climbing. Workers dangled without harnesses, risking their lives for something greater than themselves. And when it finally reached the heavens, it silenced every skeptic. Today, it's the heartbeat of Paris. But this photo reminds us of a time when it was just an idea, bare, vulnerable, and rising anyway. What dreams are you building, even when the world doesn't believe? This isn't just a map. It's a revolution. In 1908, Londoners laid eyes on this chaotic tangle of lines and stations, and the world changed. Before GPS, before Google Maps, this was the future drawn on paper. Confusing? Yes, but it whispered freedom. For the first time, people could disappear underground and reappear across the city like magic. Every colored line was more than a route. It was a path to opportunity, escape, reinvention. And though it lacked symmetry, clarity, or logic, it pulsed with ambition. This humble, hand-drawn mess paved the way for the clean, modern maps we know today. But behind its imperfections was a promise that even the most complicated journeys have a direction. And sometimes, the first draft of progress looks nothing like the final masterpiece. Would you have trusted it back then? 2 men, 1 revolution, and a cigar that ignited more than just tobacco. In this rare photo, Fidel Castro leans in as Che Guevara strikes the flame, not just to light a cigar, but to spark history. Behind the smoke was a bond fueled by dreams, fire, and defiance. To many, they were heroes who fought imperialism with grit and vision. To others, they were dangerous rebels who shook the world order. But one thing is certain. In this quiet, almost intimate moment, we witnessed the calm before storms that would reshape Latin America forever. It's a photo soaked in contradictions, friendship and strategy, rebellion and brotherhood. What were they thinking? Did they know the legacy they were carving into the 20th century? Sometimes, the most explosive revolutions begin not with a speech, but with a spark and a shared silence. He stood there in a white linen suit, simple yet defiant. In a sea of tuxedos and royalty, Gabriel Garcia Marquez brought the Caribbean sun into the cold halls of Sweden. With that smile, half mischief, half victory, he didn't just accept a Nobel Prize. He made the world listen to Latin America's forgotten voices. The ghosts of Macondo, the magical storms, the solitude, the wars, the loves that defied time, all of them stood behind him. This wasn't just literature. It was a revolution made of words. A man once banned, censored, and misunderstood now held the world's highest literary honor in his hands. But his real power? Not the medal, not the applause. It was the ink that gave life to the invisible. As cameras flashed, he looked up, not to the kings or the scholars, but to the people who had always lived in the margins and finally had a storyteller who made them eternal. He believed he was untouchable. A philosophy professor turned warlord, Abimael Guzman built an empire of fear under the name of ideology. In the shadows of Peru's mountains, he unleashed a brutal campaign that left over 70,000 people dead. He called it revolution. The people called it terror. For years, his face was a ghost, never seen, never caught. But then, on September 12, 1992, silence shattered. This photo captured what bullets and bombs never could: defeat. No army, no followers. Just one man in glasses, holding a number, wearing a borrowed jacket, reduced to a mugshot. In that moment, Peru exhaled for the first time in over a decade. The man who demanded to be called Presidente Gonzalo now answered to Prisoner 1509. Justice doesn't always roar. It sometimes clicks, like the shutter of a camera. And this image? It marked the beginning of the end of one of Latin America's darkest chapters. He stands tall, not just in stature, but in defiance. This isn't just a portrait. It's a battle cry frozen in time. General José López Urraga, one of Mexico's most complex and controversial military figures, faced empires with nothing but grit and a mind sharpened by war. During the brutal European intervention, he switched allegiances, stirred controversy, and carved his name into Mexico's turbulent 19th century. Look closer. That prosthetic leg? It wasn't a weakness, it was a reminder. A reminder of sacrifice, of cannon fire, of the price of conviction. And still, he dressed not for comfort, but for honor. Behind him, opulence. In front of him, a country divided. History may debate his loyalty, but this photo captures something undeniable: presence. You don't need to agree with a man to feel the power he once held. And sometimes, the weight of history isn't in what a man says, but how he stands. You're looking at a map, but not just any map. This is Mexico City, 1550. Before skyscrapers, before concrete, before the chaos. What you see here is a masterpiece of memory, drawn when the city still breathed the echoes of Tenochtitlan. Canals weave through the streets like veins of an ancient heart. Boats glide where buses roar today. Nature and architecture are one, not enemies. The lakes, the temples, the hills, they tell a story no GPS could ever find. This map wasn't made for tourists. It was made for kings, for conquerors, for those trying to control a land that refused to be forgotten. And yet, centuries later, the heart of this city still beats beneath the pavement. So when you walk through Mexico City today, remember, you're not just stepping through space, you're stepping through time. Because beneath your feet, the past still whispers. And this map? It's the voice. She wasn't just a Hollywood star, she was a light in the darkest places. In 1954, amid the brutal aftermath of the Korean War, Marilyn Monroe walked onto a makeshift stage, not in a movie studio, but in front of thousands of young soldiers, many of whom hadn't smiled in months. As she stepped out in her shimmering black dress, the entire base held its breath. Cameras clicked, hearts raced. Some men wept. For a few precious minutes, the war faded. Laughter returned. Hope flickered. This wasn't just entertainment, it was survival. A photograph captured that exact moment. Marilyn smiling, walking past rows of awestruck soldiers whose eyes spoke of trauma and temporary relief. Decades later, that smile still echoes, not as a symbol of glamour, but as a reminder that sometimes a single presence, a single woman, can change the temperature of an entire world. Would they ever forget her? Not in 100 lifetimes. He stood on dust no human had ever touched. July 20th, 1969, Buzz Aldrin became the second man to walk on the moon. But in this photo, he became something more. Silent, still, suspended in the void of space. Yet his reflection in the visor tells another story. Neil Armstrong, the man behind the camera, capturing history from behind a lens and a dream. Every footprint, every shadow etched into lunar soil was a reminder of Earth's fragile ambition. There were no cheers, no roaring applause. Just two men and an ocean of stars. Billions watched back home, breathless, but in that moment, it was quiet, timeless. And if you look closely, it's not just a man in a suit. It's humanity staring back at itself. One small step for a man, maybe, but this photo? It was one giant leap for our ability to dream beyond the sky. He never took a photograph, never held a microphone. Yet this portrait might be the closest we'll ever get to the face behind the greatest words ever written. William Shakespeare, poet, playwright, mystery. How did a man from a small town in England become the voice of kings and killers, of lovers and madmen? Some say he didn't even write the plays. Others call him the soul of English literature. But one thing is certain, his words reshaped the world. To be or not to be. All the world's a stage. You've heard them, but have you truly felt them? This painting, centuries old, is more than oil on canvas. It's a portal to a mind that dreamed deeper than most dare. Look into his eyes. Behind them lies tragedy, genius, and the eternal question, how did he know us so well, when we still struggle to know ourselves? Before it became an icon, it was just two lonely towers rising from the fog. In this haunting photo from the 1930s, the Golden Gate Bridge is not yet whole. Just steel and silence, suspended over uncertainty. The world was in the grip of the Great Depression, and San Francisco dared to dream the impossible. Critics called it madness. Too expensive, too dangerous, too ambitious. But every rivet, every beam, carried the weight of 1,000 hopes. Men dangled hundreds of feet above the freezing water, risking their lives for $5 a day and for history. What you see here is more than a bridge. It's a gamble on the future, a bet that courage could conquer fear. And when that final stretch of steel met in the middle, America didn't just build a bridge. It built a symbol, a red spine connecting not just land, but generations. Would you have believed in it then? He wasn't just ahead of his time. He was time unraveling itself. This haunting portrait of Nikola Tesla captures the mind that dreamed of wireless power, global communication, and machines that could shake the earth. Behind those eyes was a storm, an intellect too vast for the world around him. While Edison bathed in fame and fortune, Tesla toiled in shadows, betrayed by investors, mocked by rivals, and robbed of his legacy. They called him mad, but the madman saw the future and built it. He spoke 8 languages, barely slept, and claimed to receive visions from beyond. And yet, he died alone, in a hotel room, feeding pigeons and scribbling notes no one would understand, until decades later. Today, we worship technology, but forget the man who first touched its soul. So when you power your phone, remember this face. Not a celebrity, not a billionaire, just Nikola Tesla, the forgotten architect of the modern world. She sits with poise, but her story is silent. This 1923 portrait of Miss Agnes Ashford radiates elegance and mystery. No documents, no headlines, just this image, frozen in time. Who was she? A debutante? An artist? A rebel hiding behind refined fashion and a loyal hound? Look at her eyes. They don't smile. They pierce. In a world where women were expected to be quiet, Agnes dared to be seen. Yet history erased her name from its pages. No scandal, no fame, no legacy, just questions. The patterns on her dress, the symmetry of her posture, it all feels intentional, almost staged, like a message was left here. If only we could read it. Sometimes, the most haunting photographs aren't the tragic ones, but those that whisper, "You'll never know who I really was." So we remember her, not for what's recorded, but for what's lost. And maybe, in doing so, she finally lives again. At first glance, it's just a quiet Paris street. But look again. This isn't just any image. It's the first photograph to ever capture a human being. Taken in 1838 by Louis Daguerre, this historic shot was meant to document a boulevard. But down in the corner, there he is, a man getting his boots shined. Frozen in time, not by choice, but by accident. Everyone else in the bustling street moved too fast to register on the long exposure, except him. Unknowingly, he became the first human ever photographed. No name, no fame, just a shadow in history. Think about that. Millions of portraits later, and this one still echoes louder than most. Because it wasn't planned. It was real, raw, unrehearsed. One man, one moment, and the dawn of a new era. Photography didn't just capture his image. It captured the very soul of time itself. This isn't just a bank. It's a window into survival during one of America's toughest decades. The year is 1941. The Great Depression had left scars, and World War II was casting a long shadow. In this silent photo, a man waits patiently at the paying teller window. Another exits, head down, as if carrying the weight of an invisible war. Look closer, the sign behind the bars reads, "Hold up protection equipment." That wasn't for show. Banks back then weren't just financial institutions. They were battlegrounds of desperation, hope, and fear. Every dollar counted. Every coin was earned with sweat. And yet, there's a quiet dignity in their posture. A resilience etched into every wrinkle, every worn-out shirt. These men weren't chasing wealth. They were chasing stability. security, a future. In this frozen moment, we don't just see a transaction. We witness the cost of endurance and the silent strength that built a nation.